Hello, so today we're going to be looking at price indices. So this is also another very simple topic, and we're going to try to do it as fast as we can. Then we'll have another short video for the exercise for those who will want to practice some of the aspects, because we won't be able to exhaust everything, but we're going to cover what is needed. Then in the exercise, more tricks and close to the topic will be done. Now, what are price indices? What is a price index? Price indices, this is simply a single number that shows how the average price of a group of goods or a good has changed over time. For example, let's say samosas. Maybe you used to buy samosas when you were young. Now, these samosas, of course, are not the same price, and depending on the currency. Let's say, for example, they were 200 shillings when you were young. That's depending on how old you are. That could have been in 2005, 2010, 2020, and now the same samosas at this time are, let's say how much, maybe 1200. So how this price, like, we want to get one single figure telling us how has this price changed over the years, over that period. That is what we call a price index. I know you're going to have very many terms that are going to come along. However, for your level, you're mostly supposed, the A level, you're mostly just supposed to understand the formulas and how they work. You don't have to actually go into so much details, maybe for people who are doing masters and what. So now we're going to have something called a base year. Now the base year is the reference year against which we are comparing all the other years. Now for this case it would be 2005, because it's the year we are comparing these two. So that's the base year. Then you're going to have something called the weight. Now the weight is just the relative importance given to an item, depending on how much, because we're not going to be dealing with one item. So maybe you have samosas, you have chapatis, you have very many different things. Now the weight is going to be the relative importance. Let's say we're going to give something more weight depending on how much of it was bought. However, for all the questions, you're going to be given the weight. No one is going to ask you to come up with the weight. Now another key concept I want us to have as we go into this topic is, when I give you A out of B is equals to 2 out of 3, you should be able to know that by getting the reciprocal, like the inverse. Similarly, I can say B out of A is equals to, I also interchange this 3 out of 2. We're going to use this concept ahead, so you want to have to get used to it. So if I say A out of D is equals to, okay, A out of D is equals to a half. D out of A is equals to 2 out of 1, just the reciprocal. I'm changing this, I'm also getting the inverse of that. So I hope that makes sense. Now let's start looking at a few formulas. Now, as we've seen, it deals with the comparison of the prices of items between 2 years. Now these formulas that have many words are going to be somehow hard to remember, so we're going to stick to these because they're actually easier to remember. Now here we have the relative price index. This is like the basic and where everything starts from in price indices. The relative price index, or the price relative, it's the price in the current year out of the price in the base year. So for this question, the example that we had, it would be the price in the current year. In this case it would be 2025 or 20, depending on whichever year you're in, out of the price in the base year times 100. Hope this makes sense. So that's why you're saying that the current year price out of the base year price times 100, that is the relative price index. Then we have something called the average price index, or the simple price index. Now this, the word average, when you remember average from statistics, we said average is equal to the sum of the items out of the total number of items. So every time you're going to have average, just know you're going to have something up like summing everything, then we divide by. So you see this actually sum divided by the number of items. So it should guide you every time we're talking about average. You know we are saying you sum, then you put here out of like the number of items, but of course still a sum of the items. So this is average price index or simple price index. You're going to get all these price relatives and add them. And as I told you, we're going to be dealing with very many items, not like just one item. So you get all the price relatives and you divide by the number of items, multiply times 100. However, this 100 is already here, so this one is actually, if you get this, you don't actually have to, because the 100 is already inside the price relatives. Hope that makes sense. Now, if the average price index exceeds 100, it implies an increase. So 100 is like the price of the base year. So if you get 120, it means you've increased by 20% from the original price. Hope that makes sense. Then we have aggregate. Every time you hear aggregate, just know you sum both up and down. So this is what should stick. So simple aggregate, you're going to get the current year price, you sum all the current year prices for all the items. Then you also sum all the prices for the base year items, you multiply times 100. So for aggregate, every time you see aggregate, sum. Every time you see average, now you're going to sum something big up then down. It will be like number of items. Now we are looking at weighted price index. It's the price relative times the weight. So this is the price relative, this times this, so you also multiply times the weight. Now from the weighted price relative, we also have formulas that come from the weighted price index. So you have the weighted average price index. So I tell you, every time you see average, now you're going to the sum of all the weighted price indexes out of the sum of the weights. So this weighted average is sometimes called the composite price index. So we're going to, sometimes instead of someone telling you calculate the weighted average price index, I'm going to ask you calculate the composite price index. Now, one of the hardest bits for this topic actually is having to master these formulas. But once you master the formulas, it's a very simple thing, as you're going to see. So then now here we have the weighted aggregate price index. So weighted aggregate, every time you see aggregate, you sum and you sum. So you sum the prices times the weights. So that's why I say with the sum of the weighted current year price out of the sum of the weighted base year price. So this is basically the formula. So I'm going to roughly write them here faster, easy for us to remember them. Then we can now start looking at different questions. So we had the relative price index, or I call it the price relative. We say this is going to be the price in the current year out of the price in the base year times 100. Now these formulas, as I told you, are easier to remember in this form, and no one is going to penalize you for not cramming or remembering the formula in words and you write it in this. No one is going to penalize you. Then we had the simple price index. We also called it the average price index. And as you can see, the concept comes in order. We said average summation of this out of the number of items. From this we go to, I think we got to simple aggregate price index. Simple aggregate is going to be, we say every time you see aggregate, just know you're going to have some. So it's going to be this sum of all the prices of the current year out of the sum of all the prices of the base year times 100. So these are already three formulas that have already come. Then now we go to the weighted price index. Now we are introducing the ones that have weighted. This is going to be, you have this times 100 times the weight, and this is the price relative or the relative price index. So it's just why they say that weighted price index, the same as saying relative price index times the weights. Okay, now this is 4. So I think you see they are easier to remember, and most of these are going to stick if you sit and try to write them so many times. And I don't think they're in the logbook, so meaning if you don't know them, you don't know them. Then we're going to have, from this we can have the weighted average price index. Now weighted average, every time you see average, you're going to add something big, so you're going to now add all the sums of all the weighted price indexes. This time, instead of out of the number, you're going to add the weights. Then now we go to weighted aggregate. price index, all of them end with price index. So it's going to be the sum, actually aggregate sum, but this time it's initially we had just this, but now you have to add the weight times the weight times 100. And now these are the formulas. Others are going to come along there, but they're going to be very simple. But this is it actually. We're only going to add one formula. What should you note? We said weighted average price index can also be called the composite price index. So if a question asks find the composite price index, they're asking you to find the weighted average price index. Now another question can ask you what is the cost of living index, the same as the simple aggregate. So cost of living index. So cost of living index. It's the same as the simple aggregate price index. Okay, so now let's start with an example. Here this question says the price of an egg was shillings 400 in 2010 and shillings 700 in 2011. Taking 2010 as the base year, calculate the price relative in 2011. Comment on your answer. So they want us to find the price relative. So the formula for price relative is PN out of P naught times 100. However, now as we work out these numbers for easy interpretation and to avoid errors, we're just going to be quoting the exact year. So here instead of saying PN, I just know what's the current year in this case. I want us to take 2010 as the base year, so 2011 should be the current year. So it's 2011 out of P 2010, which we are taking as the base year, times 100. Then now I come and quote that the price of an egg was 400 in 2010 and 700 in 2011. So in 2011 it's 700, in 2010 it was 400. Multiply times 100. So now all you need to do is to put this into a calculator. It gives you 175. Now remember we said 100 is like the value of the base. So anything above 100 meaning the price increased by 75%. So that's the comment you give. The price increased by 75%. So here we found the price relative. However, it's going to be very rare for the questions to be asked directly like this. Most of the times the questions have a few tricks and they require you to okay, now we have this question. Now it says the table below shows the prices of items in shillings during the years 2010 and 2011. Then taking, so here we have prices for these different items in 2010, 2011, 2010, even the weights. Show you how these weights are gotten depending on the relative importance of these items. However, you're not required to determine them, they're always given to you. That's why I said you don't have to think about it, just use what has been given in the question. Now the question has said calculate the price relative for each item in 2011. Hence obtain the simple price relative for the items in 2011. Now because this is our first example, I'm going to accept for us to do it the ordinary way. And what do I mean? Like where you come and say sugar, then you start quoting. You say they want us to calculate the price relative for each item in 2011. So you're using 2010 as the base year. So we're going to come and say P 2011 out of P 2010 times 100. Then you come and quote what was the price of sugar in 2011. 3,500 out of 2,500 times 100. Put this into your calculator, you get 140. Move on to the next item. And I think you can see that this is going to be somehow long for just that. Then we go to bread. But I'm not going to quote the formula again because I have little space. So bread, I'm going to look for the price in 2011 is 2250 out of the price in 2010 is this times 100. This is going to give you 125. Then you go to coffee. Coffee, you say what's the price in 2011, 1,800 divided by 1,200 times 100. For coffee, you get 150. Then you go to the next item. So the next item, salt. 2011 is this, 2010 is 2,000 times 100. Price for salt, the price relative for salt is 110. So now we've come out with all the price relatives for all these items. Now the question says obtain the simple price relative for the items in 2011. So here we've obtained the price relative for all these items. So the question now wants us to find the simple price relative for these items. Okay, let me create a blank page. Okay, so now we found the price relative for all the items in 2011. Now the question says we want us to find the simple price relative for the items in 2011. So let's come here and say we want us to find the simple price relative. We remember we said the simple price relative is the same as the average price relative. This is the sum of all the relative price indices out of the number of items. And for our question up, we had obtained all the relative price indices for all the items, so we just have to add them. Just have to add 140 plus these are the values we have here: 140, 125, 150, 110. So 140, 125, 150, 110. Now the number of items, just have to come and count: sugar, bread, coffee, salt. So there are 4. So divided by 4. So this would be 525 out of 4. And here I would get this is 131.25. So just by this we've gotten a simple price relative. However, what I was saying last time was, for such a question like that, you see already has very many parts. If you go this way, it's going to become very long. It's going to be, except maybe if you're just choosing to do it for the marks only in a paper. But usually if you're like practicing, you need to be able to do it fast. And how you can do it faster is you redraw the table and you solve the questions within the table. So here we have items, have sugar, bread, coffee, and salt. So these are the items. So I have the price in 2010. This is 2,500. I'm redrawing the table now. I'm redrawing the table. Then this is 2,000. Then the price in 2011, 35, 225. So this is an easier way to do it for those questions that you find that are very long. Instead of having to, in the weights, they gave us the weights as 5, 2, 4, 3. So we come here. Then now we add a column for the price. We add a column for the price relative. In this column, we are saying this column is 211 out of this times 100. So I don't know if this is making sense. So we have added a column so that we don't have to do each of them independent. So here I just have to come and say, for this case, though we did this above, but I'm just doing it because this is there. So next time we'll just go straight. So we have, so you do the same for all of these. This out of 1,800 times 100. This out of 1,200 times 100. Then we come here, it's this out of 2,000 times 100. This we had already said is 110. This is 150. This is 125, and this is 140. So now for this part, when you are adding this, you just come here. You just come here and add up and say this is sum of everything. And here the sum would be 5 to 4, so 5 to 5. So you see how you've done all this that we spent all this space on, you've done it in just one column. Then now you see what the next part of the question was. The next part wants us to find the weighted average price index for the items. So you now ask yourself, what is the weighted average? So these formulas are very good to remember, because as long as you know the formula weighted average price index, remember we said for average you bring this sum. Since this is weight, you add this and then the summation of this. So meaning here you just have to add a column for that has Pn out of P naught, which is this, times 100 by this time times the weight also. And now I already have this first part here that you see. So I just have to, so I get this and multiply times the weight. So I just have to get this times the weight. So that's why I can come here and say this is 140. Now the reason I try to put, because if someone wants to give you marks for the working, at least they can put them here. It's different from someone who just comes and quotes 140, 125 without showing any working. But by putting these things, you actually have a working. Though of course the ideal is to go the long way, but here because of time and the space, this is a better alternative. So here you get 600, you get 330. So you see how short this is. You now just have to come down here and say the summation of all this. You add, you get 1880. You now come and substitute it here. But now the summation of this is 1880. Then you add the weights. You add 5 plus 2 plus 4 plus 3. And here you get 14. So your answer would be 134.2857. So you see, just like that, you've solved that number. Now the next part of the question was saying the weighted aggregate price index. Now weighted aggregate price index, weighted aggregate, this is summation of Pn times W, or the summation of PO W times 100. Now here we've run out of space, but you could actually add a column for Pn times W, that's P 2011 times W, then P 2010 times W, then you do the same. Then now here we don't have space, so what you were supposed, okay, let me create space. Okay, so to get the weighted aggregate, it's going to be the summation of current year times the weight, summation of the base year times the weight. So for us, since we are not using a table, we just have to get every single value and multiply every single value in 2011 first. We multiply times our prospective weight for that year. So that's what we are doing here. So here is times 100. We do the same for the base year. So you get 35,800 out of 26,900 times 100. So you get your answer as 133.0589. That's your weighted aggregate price index. So let us look at, I think, about 2 more examples and we'll have gotten a grasp of it. Now we have this question here. Now these are very common questions that are usually asked, but they require an application of your understanding of the concept, because this question says the price relatives of an item for the years 2011, 2012, 2013 based on the year 2010 are this and this respectively. Compute the new price relative for the years 2010, 2011 and 2013, taking 2012 as the base year. So you realize here, if this was your first time meeting this question without having had prior exposure to the concept, you would be stuck. Now you can actually pause and try to work it out if you want to give yourself a test. But okay, let's start. Now usually when you're given any question, try to see what have I been given, and before you even try to ask yourself what do they want me to find. So what have we been given? They're saying the price relatives for this one item for these years based on 2010. So let me now start listing what I have. I have the price relative for this item for 2011 based on 2010 as the base year, but now this is not price relative. For it to be price relative, it should be times 100 is equals to 120. Okay, let me go to the next one. The next piece of information I have is the price relative for the item in 2012, still with 2010 as the base year, is 95. Okay, I have that. Then I move on the price relative for 2013 based on 2010 as the base year. Here it's still 110. Now this is what I have. Now for these questions, usually you have to manipulate this and you're going to understand why in a bit. So you make this the subject. So this is 2011 divided by 2010. It's going to be, I'm going to bring this side because I'm making this the subject, out of 100. P2012 out of P2010 equals to 95 out of 100. P2013 divided by P2010 is going to be equals to 110 divided by 100. So we have these three. Hope you remember the other concept I told you about, the reciprocals and how they work. So here we have this. Now we come and see what have we been tasked to find. Let me change the color of the pen so that you can split these things properly. So this is what we have been given. Now the first thing the question wants us to find the new price relatives for the years this, taking 2012 as the base year. So the question now, the first thing it wants me to find is P2010 out of P2012 times 100, because this is the price relative for 2010 taking 2012 as the base year. But I've not been given any information apart from the one above. So I'm going to first take this out and say, can I get P2010 out of P2011 to P2012? So I look through all these and see, is there anything that tries to resemble this? So this is 2011 out of 2010. No, it doesn't. 2012 out of 2010. This is 2010 out of 2012. So you see these ones resemble, it's just that they are the reciprocal. So this is where the other concept I told you. Remember I told you if you have A out of B being equals to 2 out of 3, it's the same as saying B out of A is equals to 3 out of 2. So here now, this thing is the same, it's just that they have been interchanged. So that's the same thing, I interchange this is equals to 100 out of 95. But however, this is not what I want. What I want is this. So now I can say now 2010 out of 2012 times 100 is going to be equals to 100 out of 95 times 100. And here what am I going to get? I'm going to get 105.263. Now I've gotten one of the price relatives for the new price relatives I'm required to find. So that one is done. Now let's move to the next one. The next one they want is 2011 taking 2012 as the base year. Now for this case I'll quote the formula actually. After now, when you look through all these, this is 2011 2010, 2012 2010, 2013, because I'm looking for something that has 2011 and 2012. Now if you realize there is nothing here that is actually exactly the same as what we have here, now we have to manipulate this to give us terms that can express something similar to this. So how do we do that? I should follow here very closely. So we are going to first write this. This is P2011 out of. Now when in these questions you see we have 2011, 2010, 2012 and 2013. Those are the three values we have, because there is no other, and is just interplaying with three prices: 2011, 2010, actually three, four. So 2011, 2010, 2012 and 2013. So we have to now introduce a new variable that we don't have here. And now for this case I see we are going to introduce 2010. So we're going to say out of P 2010. Now this 2010 we have to eliminate it because it's not part of our question. So we are multiplying by 2010 here, then here we put 2012. So you realize what we've generated here, when you cancel this out and this out, it gives you this. But we've just introduced a new term, which is 2012. And we're not randomly choosing any term to introduce. We're introducing a term which is common to all our values here. And if you notice, you realize 2010 is here, 2010 is here, meaning chances are high it's going to be easier for us to manipulate using it. So here we just come and now look for 2011 out of 2010. So we get 120 out of 100. You should note this, I've not randomly decided this. here, this is when this cancels out, it comes back to this because this cancels. Times, now 2010 out of 2012. Here I have 2012 out of 2010, so I get the reciprocal so that I can have this. So I get times 100 out of 95. So I end up having P 2011 out of P 2012 is equals to it's going to be equals to, this cancels, okay, 120 out of 95. So now finally I can come and say I want to get P 2011 out of P 2012 times 100. It is going to be 120 out of 95, which we had, times 100. And that's going to be our answer. Answer is going to be 126.3158. That's the answer for that. But however, we've not finished the question. We now have to get one more term. And let's work on that. So we have to get 2013, taking 2012 as the base year. Now still, when you look at this, we don't have anything. We can just get the reciprocal or pick out and get the answer. So we still have to bring this. Now we have to introduce something new. Still, when you look here, the commonest is 2010, so we have to introduce 2010. But now this, we have to remove it, so we put here this to remove this. But now we have to bring back our 2012 here. So this cancels with that. Now we have to pick this from the values. We had 2013 out of 2010 is 110 out of 100 times 2010 out of 2012 is not there, but we can get the reciprocal of this to get this. So this is 100 out of 95. This would cancel with that, so we would get, this is 110 out of 95 to be 2013 out of 2012. Then now we come and say 2013 out of 2012 times 100 is going to be 110 this times 100. And here what do we get? We're going to get 115.7895. So this, and now this is just the first example, that's why it may sound new, but with time it's actually going to make so much sense. We're going to look at, I think, 2 more examples are going to be enough to finish this topic.